Commissioner.
Yes.
Some time ago in the 90s, I guess, we created some fund for cigarette tax enforcement. I'd like to get your interpretation of, or at least some information about, how much we have been able to recover through enforcement of this cigarette tax, what we've been able to recover, your estimate, if you will, or if you have it, about how much you figure we are losing versus how much we've recovered. And in general, just if it were me, and I'm not the governor, don't want to be, I would be looking at ways to increase enforcement to gain revenue. But if you're going to tell me that we have no loss of revenue because we tax every pack of cigarettes that comes in here and we don't have any bootleg cigarettes and all this other stuff, then I guess that's not an option, and one way to do it is to increase the revenue by raising the tax. But I do believe we will push people not to quit, but to find other sources.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Representative Blair, the last part I didn't get that. What do you
I don't
find
think
the
we will.
solutions, meaning?
I don't think we will get people to quit by raising the tax unless we do it astronomically. I think what we do is push them to other sources, because the percentage of people that smoke related has changed a lot since we've started raising all this.
Other sources, meaning out of state?
Obviously.
The previous question, okay, that's didn't follow the case. In terms of enforcement, I don't have the numbers on top of my head. I'd be glad to have our staff compile what data we can on enforcement. Whether or not, is there any bootleg activity going on in the state of Ohio? Of course there is. We have enforcement folks out there work independently, work with Ohio Patrol, and make seizures, routinely. We had one a couple of months ago, particularly was an 18-wheeler. The Ohio Patrol pulled him over for a standard traffic violation, opened up the back, and it had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of untaxed tobacco being carried from one state through Ohio to another, or something like that. So we know it's out there. Can we catch all of it? Any more than other illegal activity and so on? Probably not. But I'll be glad to get for you the data that we have in terms of what we have seized or what recovery we have made in recent years. Again, I don't know how far back, I've not asked this question before, how far back our records go, but I'll be glad to have folks look at that. Thank you.
We have two more questions in 472, then we're going to go to 490. We will make it. Representative Green.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director.
Yes, sir.
Of course, coming from Brown County, where it's the tobacco capital of Ohio, up until just a few years ago, was the only tobacco market in the state of Ohio, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about tobacco. In 2006, when the last increase in the tobacco tax was implemented, in my district, the loss of sales ranged from 16 to 20%. At the same time, directly across the river in Mason County, Kentucky, there was a 16% increase in sales. And to the extreme, in Campbell County, Kentucky, there was a 119% increase in sales of tobacco products. That, combined with the issues of, and I know we keep talking about local government fund impacts in smaller jurisdictions. In Brown County, for example, as you speak to the issue of only maybe a 3 to 4% net income impact from the state revenues, but as you know, with the restriction of the funds that are distributed from the state, we had a glut in gasoline tax, and because of the local government funds being the only source of general revenue funds from the state, that was a 10% reduction in our general fund. And I guess the question I have is, at what point does the partnership of state and local governments become such that there is none?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Green, are you suggesting that it's gone that far?
I can see,
3% reduction of total revenues impacted by the LGF cut is a disconnect between state and local government?
well, because if you're looking at general fund impacts, yes. And I say that because, and Representative Stern touched on it just briefly, as it relates to larger jurisdictions, you may have a $100,000 cut in your general fund, which would be, or in comparison, that you may have to lay a few employees off, where in a smaller jurisdiction, like say for example Brown County, you may lay 1 or 2 people off and be at a 50% cut in your staff.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Green, again, with all due respect, I think you're looking at it too narrowly in a couple of ways. Number one is that the MBR, and the tax portion of the MBR, let alone the MBR as a whole, does a lot of things to help Ohio. The K-12, the higher ed, the workforce development, all the other areas I'm not here to testify about today, and the tax pieces, certainly are benefiting Brown as well as it does every other part of the state. So I think that's an unfair characterization to zero in on. Okay, this one particular tax affects us more strongly than it does some other part of the state or whatever. Therefore, there's a disconnect between state and local government. I just don't think that's a fair assessment. Secondly, is that what are they? And again, I'm not a health expert, and others will testify in other areas. But what is the cost? What is the cost to you, to your community, or the state of Ohio as a whole, relative to the health damages by smoking? So I mean, I factor that in as well. I think that we need to step back and look at the much bigger picture in terms of tax, in terms of tax policy, regulatory issues that were mentioned earlier today. And many other initiatives, infrastructure, education, drug enforcement. Again, it's all those elements as well have an impact on improved standard of living and improved opportunities for Ohioans by business growth. There's plenty of small businesses in your county that are benefiting by the 50% reduction we made in House Bill 59. I mean, it could go on and on, but the point is that just zeroing in on that one state, that's the one we need to focus on, and that indicates the disconnect between state and local government, I think, is an unfair position to take.